Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Today's episode is Elias Haslanger, a well-known name that is respected and revered as a staple saxophonist here in the Austin scene. Elias is the band leader of the award-winning group Church on Monday and has received praise and write-ups in numerous publications such as Downbeat, Rolling Stone, and the Austin Chronicle. In this episode, we talk about being on the road with Maynard Ferguson and cutting a record with Ellis Marsalis. We also talk about the inception of the group Church on Monday and the mentorship of Dr. James Polk, and a memory at the Elephant Room in which the sounds of Waterfall were anything but relaxing. So, moving on to the releases of the week, the first one that we have comes from Elias. It's the album that started it all for that group. The album is called Church on Monday, and it released in 2012. It's an award-winning record that garnered the title of Best Jazz Album from the Austin Chronicle in the year 2013, and then also it was featured in a write-up by Downbeat in 2013 as well. It features Dr. James Polk, Jake Langley, Daniel Durham, and Scott Lanningham on drums, and Pete Rodriguez as well on congas, and has led to an 8-year residency at the historic Continental Club Gallery. If you want to support this record directly and go get a vinyl of it, or just purchase some digital files that will directly support Elias and the band, you can go over to elijazz.com. And then if you want to find all of his digital recordings, you can go over to his Bandcamp, which is eliashaslanger.bandcamp.com. And lastly, if you want to keep up with all of the announcements like his live stream show that is happening tonight, Friday, April 23rd, you can go over and follow him on Instagram for all the daily updates. His Instagram is at Elias Haslanger Music. So go and follow him for all of the latest updates. Moving on to the second release of the week, the next one that we want to plug is Alexa Tarantino's brand new kind of surprise album. It really snuck up on me. I had no idea it was coming out, and then one day last week she was like, it's out, and so it was such a pleasant surprise. Those Manhattan Cats are always releasing things all the time, and we are absolutely here for it. So talking about this album, it's called Firefly, and again, it just released here in 2021 last week. It is her third release under the Positone label, and I'm a sucker for vibraphone, so as soon as I heard that, I was immediately on board. And as always, this album highlights her versatility on numerous woodwind instruments and an incredible array of compositions from each member in the band, as well as a couple compositions from Wayne Shorter as well that you know and love. So if you want to support this release directly and get a CD or buy digital files, you can go over to alexatarantino.com, or you can go over to Instagram and follow her there for all the latest updates and special like sales that she has going on and all of the other initiatives that she's started, and that is on Instagram at Alexa Tarantino. So now moving on to the releases of the week, or I'm sorry, not the releases of the week, the Monk shows that we have. The first one that we have is coming up on Sunday. It's the Panky Trio. They're going to be streaming from the new location in Pedernales Station. It's going to be Sunday, April 25th at 7:30 p.m. Go and tune into that. The second one that we have coming up is the Bruce Saunders Trio. That is going to be on Tuesday, April 27th as a part of the Austin Jazz Society Project Safety Net fundraiser concerts. And then the last one that we want to plug for this week is on Thursday, April 29th. It is Tarek Hassan's quartet, and this is his farewell show as he moves to France. He's been here in the Austin scene for quite a while, and he is moving to France, so this is his last show here in the States for a while. So tune into that and make sure to donate. I'm sure more than anyone it would be incredibly beneficial to help fund the band as he makes his move over to France. So and then the last thing, of course, the last one I want to plug is Elias's show that he has coming up tonight at Native Hostel on the east side of Austin. The shows are sold out for the limited in-person seating. However, it is going to be live streamed for both sets at 7:30 and 9:30. So head on over to monksjazz.com, and on YouTube find Monks Jazz Club, and facebook.com/monksjazz club as well to catch those live streams. It's going to be fantastic, and it would be a perfect supplement after this conversation with Elias. So anyways, that is all the announcements for this week. Check out the Monk shows, check out Elias tonight, check out Elias's Church on Monday and Alexa Tarantino's Firefly. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 41, Elias Haslanger. This is Off the Bandstand. to commend you on that show. Like I texted you and I texted Mike and trying to drop as many fire emojis in the chat as possible. But man, there was just magic in that room. And I mean, just from every single person that was on the bandstand, I mean, it was very clear. I mean, obviously Mike is the real deal and everybody on the bandstand is the real deal, but he knows how to put together a group that is really going to complement each other. And man, I have to commend you on your playing. Like it was a magical night. And it was one of those where we have some guests staying with us right now. So for the sake of like quarantining and have them quarantine, couldn't make it down there, but it like took everything in me not to just pack up and like get in the car and like head down to the club. Cause it was such a great stream, man.
Yeah, it was. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Mike's a great arranger, as you know. And so we just had a chance to run through a little bit of that before the gig. And so if I had another crack at it, I'd probably do better. It was still good. Like, you're right. There was a good chemistry. And I think we all were anxious to get in front of a crowd again, even though it was small, they were really into it. And so I really appreciate playing for people who are listening and paying attention, a smaller crowd than a large crowd that's not. So it was a real treat.
Yeah, I'm curious because, I mean, from you playing and I wrote down like a few of them, right? Jazz Alley, Snug Harbor, Blue Note, and then playing at the places like here in town, like Elephant and Parker, and just like all the different spots in town, whether it's a seated concert or it's like a club setting or whatever. How does the idea of like a very small, intimate kind of listening room like Monk's, compare to your personal tastes of where you'd like to play?
Oh, I love it. It's great. I think the immediate feedback that people right on top of you. And so I much prefer that than a large concert stage, I mean, there's nothing wrong with playing to a lot of people in a concert hall, that's for sure. It's just, you don't get that immediate kind of interaction and feedback, right? You can feel the energy a lot more when you're in a small club and the people are kind of right on top of you. So you can look them in the face after your solos, you can see them smiling and clapping, and after the set, you can go out and sit down with them and have a drink or visit with them, So in a small club setting is where it's at for me. I really, that's kind of where the magic really happens.
Yeah, I think that kind of encourages much more of like a familial kind of setting of jazz, where it kind of takes our genre kind of has this like mystique about it, that just kind of comes with the territory. So I think being in a room with however many people and then just having that where it really does feel like, oh no, we can have a conversation, like you're a part of this as well. And of course, like you said, like in big concert halls or wherever you're playing, there is that aspect where you can invite people into it, but not quite to the same extent as, that. And like you're saying, you can go sit down and have a beer. It wouldn't be an Off the Bandstand episode if I didn't mention Kurt Elling, but like, at Birdland, like I have noticed every single time I see him, he walks around before the show starts, like about an hour before. And if he sees familiar faces, he'll go up and say hello and be like, hey, how you guys doing? Which I think is kind of the exact opposite of kind of the holier than thou, arrogant, maybe like pop star, whatever. Like I'm using a stereotype with like the pop thing, but the idea of, being like, no, I'm gonna shut myself away, and then it's gonna be this grand reveal when I walk on stage. But being a little bit more connected with your audience, even on a conversation level, I think makes the exchange of music and like I'm giving you music, you're receiving it, and we're experiencing something together. I think that helps that dynamic so much more than just like and presenting, for what it's worth. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've seen it work both ways, but for me, I much prefer to kind of get in there with the audience, and I consider a lot of my people who come out to see me friends.
Yeah.
I've known over years and years, and so I do like to see them actually before and after, just to catch up with them and see how they're doing in life.
Yeah.
There's something that happens in between, which is like you said, it's a mutual thing. Like we give, they give. We receive, they receive. It's win for everybody. So that's really what I'm most excited about, getting back to playing in front of live people, is that exchange and feeling like you're connecting, you know, that's what it's about.
100%, man. Something else that I had to commend you for is, or just acknowledge, I guess, is, man, I was watching this whole morning, watching your Church on Monday stream from November from Monks. And there was something that was so striking where you really, it was so evident that the horn was just an extension of your body. And it wasn't like there was this kind of like artifice and like, we're going to like whatever. It was so evident that it almost reminded me the same way of, you know, being a singer. It reminded me of that kind of expression that a singer has where it really comes from so deeply within. And that's not to say that that is a unique thing in jazz, but it is something that is so valued when we see it. And I feel like the way that you interact with your bandmates, like you would play a solo, you'd play your heart out. It was like exactly what everybody wants to see from a genuine side of a musician. And then you would just look at Tommy like he was your hero. And you were so in tune with everything that was going on, which really kind of drives home this kind of pensive, very not reserved, but very respectful and very like, it was my turn to say something. Now everybody pay attention to this. Cause like what the leader does, everybody else is going to do. So how is that dynamic with being a band leader, kind of seeing all your bandmates? Do you feel almost as if you were an audience member watching them, or does it feel like it's just like, okay, now here's our band dynamic?
Well, so it's a great question. And so I was on the road with Maynard Ferguson for a while, and I learned a lot from him because ultimate showman, right? The minute he hit the stage till he got through signing hundreds and hundreds of autographs, he was completely engaged with every musician in his band, every audience member that came, you know, to see the show, and then everybody that came up afterwards to get an autograph and actually just be around the boss. And it really struck me. I mean, he would thank me personally by name after every solo I took every night. Wow. That's how in tune he was. And so I really took that to heart, because as a young musician growing up, I listened and saw a lot of jazz, and there were times where you would see, you know, a soloist come and take their solo, and then they'd walk off the stage and they'd go get a drink or talk to somebody. Yeah. Still see it, right? And it just completely distracts from what's happening on stage. Especially because, you know, I'm a soloist, and so I would watch the saxophone player, and then they'd wander off stage somewhere, and I naturally would follow them, you know, and see where are they going? What are they doing? And so suddenly my attention was taken off of the music. And so both as an audience member and as a band leader, I'm aware of that, because people are looking at me when I'm on stage, right? And they're wanting to know what I'm involved in, what I'm doing. And I'm not saying that I stay on stage 100% of the time, all the time. But I try to, especially when it's in close quarters like that at the gallery, or when you're on video, unless I'm completely off of the camera, which is a totally different thing, which means I'm not distracting from what's on the stream. When I am on camera or when I'm on stage, I am completely focused on whoever has the music at the time. And when I think about music, whether it's, you know, pop, rock, classical, jazz, whatever, you know, there's always a melody, there's always a line that's going through the music, right? Whether it's the singer that's carrying the melody or the soloist that's their turn to take the melody, there's this string that goes through the entire song, and it's really about service to the song, right? So you play the melody, and then each soloist takes their turn at their interpretation of that melody, but it's not supposed to be disconnected from the song, right? It's got to flow from the beginning to the end, and it all has to make sense together. So naturally, I feel like when I'm done, I'm passing the baton to the next soloist, who's taking that and running their race, if you will, or their portion of that and then handing it off to the next soloist. So it really should be this continuation. And so that's what I see as my role as the band leader, is to make sure that that line is not interrupted, and it's in service to the song that we're participating in from the very beginning to the very end. So I would actually be interrupting that line and doing disservice to the music if I were to, not pay attention or be involved in some way in what's going on in the music. So that is something I'm very conscious about and that I pay attention to, not only when I'm on the stage, but when I'm observing or listening to music as well. It's a big deal.
It's really beautiful to hear that sentiment, especially because I think it can be very easy to be focused on maybe personal self in stuff, because it's like, oh, I got to play the best licks. I got to, hopefully, especially for younger musicians who are playing with people who maybe it's like a potentially connecting point where it could be a snowball effect, right? That leads to more opportunities. They really want to make sure that they're, flexing, but not in like an arrogant way. They're really putting their best foot forward, but at the same time, they don't want to overstep. So hearing that of just like, no, at any point in time, I'm going to be focused entirely on the music and serving that. I think that is the reverence that is exactly what our genre is all about. Man, I have to ask, because I'm sure like people listening probably just like immediately perked up whenever you were like, yeah, I play with Maynard Ferguson. And looking at, your bio, I was a little intimidated, more so than maybe some episodes that I do, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's such like a wealth, to use a phrase that Adrian Ruiz says is like, we don't realize it, but Austin has like an embarrassment of riches where we kind of take it for granted. But there's like all these people who have such extensive careers and so many things where we could learn a lot from. And it's crazy that Austin hasn't blown up more as the jazz scene recognition that it deserves. But going back, I mean, it seems like there has just been this like continuous, snowball of good fortune that is well deserved in your career. So I could not be more interested to learn like how that started and what led to situations like playing with Maynard Ferguson. So where did you come up?
Well, I was born and raised in Austin. Okay. And I went to Castise, O. Henry, Austin High, and went to University of Texas. And my first real mentor was when I went to O. Henry Junior High School, and I was very intimidated by the band director there. I learned all my scales because he scared me into learning all of my scales. A pretty good reader. So I started to get my chops together then, 7th, 8th grade. But then the band director, or at the time he was actually the orchestra director, his name was LaFalco Corky Robinson. And he came and heard me, and he gave me my first Charlie Parker solo to learn. It was a transcription.
What was it?
That's a good one. I think it was Cool Blues. It was Cool Blues. And I went out and bought that record right after that. And I was captivated by it in 8th grade. I was like, I had never heard anything like this before. So I would spend every night listening to it. Up until that point, I was really into the electric guitar. And so I was playing a lot of Stevie Ray Vaughan and, Van Halen and Albert Collins and Buddy Guy, a lot of the blues guys. I was way into electric guitar as a kid too. But this was, Corky was like, here, check out Bird. So, okay. So then when I got to high school, Corky would have us stay after school and he would give us C charts with melodies, chord changes, and he would tell us improvise on the melody. And I would say, I can't do this. It's in C. So we'll transpose it. I was like, you're crazy. How do you do that? So he was the first guy that really kind of opened my eyes to, playing by ear and playing with the melody and reading different charts and really expanding my vision of what a creative musician could be. He really pushed me and challenged me, learned all my modes and scales and, pushed me to solo in front of my peers. Like, great story I tell about in high school in the jazz band, because we had a jazz band that would play, And he said, we're going to do a concert, and here's where we're going to do it. We're going to do it in the cafeteria during lunch. At the time, I was like, you are crazy. There's no way I'm playing in front of my peers during lunch. That's so embarrassing. I would never do that. No, I was mortified. And so, nope, that's what we're going to do. So we set up and we played during lunch. I kind of kept to myself, put my head down, and we played. And to my surprise, afterwards, I had a lot of people come up to me and say, man, that sounded great, including some cute girls. And I was,
that's the ticket.
That was it. After that, I was like, when are we going to do that again?
Yeah, sure.
So he was really important. So Corky was the first one. The second one, I went to the University of Texas and I studied classical saxophone with the great maestro Harvey Patel. And Mr. Patel, really, I attribute my ability to actually play the saxophone. So all of the Marcel Mule stuff, and how to make a reed, how to make a good sound, how to breathe, all of the important things that we need to know as a musician. I mean, he was so just dedicated to making sure that I took it seriously, and did, and so I became in one of his, players as a classical musician, as well as I also did jazz and JO and the jazz ensembles and all the things there. But I took this classical saxophone playing very seriously, and I played quartet, I played Barry, I played tenor, I played alto, I played soprano, and really, tried to dedicate myself to learning the instrument the best that I possibly could. And I really have Harvey to thank for that, Mr. Patel. He's really a huge influence.
If you don't mind me asking, I think that's really interesting that you had focused on a classical influence. Was that for your undergraduate or for your master's degree?
Yeah, undergraduate degree in saxophone performance. No, I played wind ensemble, orchestra, sax quartet, jazz ensemble, jazz orchestra. I mean, I did pretty much everything you could do. And it was because there was no jazz degree at the time, right? Okay. But even then, like I knew after studying with Harvey, even for a year, like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn the saxophone. I wanted to be a performance major. I didn't want to be an education major. I wanted to play the saxophone. And so all the time was focused and dedicated on being in those ensembles and being the best saxophone player I could. I had no eye to being a professional saxophone player at that time. I really didn't think much more about just getting my degree. In recording and playing. It wasn't until, I guess it was kind of towards the end of my college career, which was 90, 91, 92, that I started getting calls for gigs here in Austin. So, as a young man, I would go out and I would go seek out people like Rich Harney, who was actually a family friend. My dad, Rich, so I knew him when I was a little kid. James Pope, A.D. Mannion, Evan Arredondo, Sticky, all the guys, John Mills, Mordecai, Bob Meyer was a huge influence on me, Tony Campisi. And so I kind of started checking out the Austin music scene as a player and started getting calls, right? And so this would be all kinds of stuff. I do blues gigs, I do country gigs, I do reggae gigs. There's a lot of reggae in town at that time. They had horn sections, so they paid, right?
Yeah, right.
Some reggae, blues gigs, and then some jazz gigs, right? And I would get my songs together. I'd go down the jam session on Monday nights and start sitting in the mic and kind of how a lot of people when they move to town come up and get gigs and stuff. So. I would go down and hear all the cats and get intimidated, like Bob Meyer playing saxophone and piano and trumpet.
Yeah.
All the tunes, Bam Around Midnight, all that. So that was kind of my first entree to the Austin jazz scene was 92. Well, I graduated UT and I went up to the Manhattan School of Music in the fall of 92, and I played in their top band, and I studied there for a short time. When I left my wife to be here in Austin, and that was very difficult to do a long distance relationship. So I came back from New York in 93, and we got married in 94.
Okay.
And then I next 6 years trying to convince her to move to New York. And during that time, I was a professional musician in Austin exclusively. So I played with anybody that would call, right? I was your classic freelance jazz musician. I played with bands like the Lucky Strikes. I played my own group all the time around town. There was a lot of places to play in the mid to late 90s. It was kind of like the first boom for Austin when the tech world kind of discovered it. So there was a lot of money flowing around. There were clubs like Cedar Street. Elephant's been around forever. Of course, I played there for a long time. I thank Mike Mordecai for that opportunity. But yeah, you know, I made it as a musician until, you know, I decided to go to Texas State and get my master's degree down there. My friend Freddie Mendoza and I would drive down there after 3 a.m. gigs. We'd get up at 7 and drive down to Texas State. And we actually got, you know, teaching assistants there. And then I actually taught for a year down there. I taught saxophone, composition, and ran one of the big bands down there.
So that was something I was super curious about. Were you on faculty, or was that part of your graduate degree's requirements?
Well, no. So as a grad degree, I was a TA and did do the band and had some other responsibilities there. But as soon as I got my degree, I was hired on as faculty there.
That's crazy. That's like insane to me that, you know, like, I mean, so impressive that, you know, someone sees someone as a student and then they immediately graduate and they go, all right, just like come on faculty. That, like, I feel like that's not super that heard of anymore.
Well, remember, this is back in 98. So, I mean, there's been a lot of, you know, a lot of people gone to get their jazz degrees since then. And it's a much different landscape now. It's probably a lot more competitive, but you know, I knew Keith Winking down there and I knew the faculty down there for years. And so they were comfortable with me. But you know, after a year of doing that, my wife finally decided to go to New York. And so we moved up there in 2000. Now, very important connection was made while I was at Texas State. Paul Armstrong was a trumpet player, friend of mine, was in the big band with me. And just after I moved to New York in 2000, I think it was the fall of 2000, I got a call from Maynard. And I was kind of out of the blue. And he said, no, I think it was his musical director that called me, not Maynard. Okay. Said, hey, you know, we got word of you from Paul, who was in the band. Paul Armstrong was in Maynard's band. And he referred me to the gig. You know, and how this stuff happens, you know, is like, it's who you know, right? Right. And so how that happened was, you know, I was just scraping by in New York, doing odd jobs, you know, temp jobs, just trying to make money, trying to meet people and try to make it up there. Because as you know, it's very difficult and extremely expensive. Sure. So the MD called, he said, okay, send me samples of your playing. So I sent my CDs. I had recorded standards, For the Moment, and Kicks Are for Kids. So I had 3 CDs out there already.
So you had already recorded the hit with Ellis Marsalis at that point.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
I can tell you that story too.
I would love to. Yeah.
I want to finish up the Maynard story real quick. So
of course.
He got my CDs, and I'm sure that helped, right? That CD with Ellis, I'm sure helped. And so sure enough, they called and said, hey, you know, do you want the gig? And I said, of course, I'll take the gig, you know, Maynard, and I'm here in New York. I need to do that. So I went out on the road on the bus. It was a challenging gig because it did not pay very well. And the whole big band was on one bus. So I was on the top bunk, and the bunk, you know, the bus sways at night. I couldn't really sleep. And we'd play the gig, get on the bus and drive all night, you know, hit a hotel, get cleaned up, go to the gig, play the gig, get on the bus, drive all night, do it, you know, over and over. So sometimes you really would wonder, you know, what city am I in? Yeah. But the thing was, is Maynard couldn't sleep on the bus either. So we would sit in the lounge late at night, 1 or 2 in the morning, and he would just tell me stories, he knew Bird, he knew Miles. He was best friends with Oscar Peterson. Wayne Shorter held the same chair in his band that I did. He knew Louis Armstrong. I mean, he literally knew everyone and had experience with everybody. So I had that firsthand, stories from Maynard on the bus, almost every day, hearing about Miles, hearing about, Johnny Hodges. I mean, it just went on and on. It was amazing. It was incredible. Yeah. And he was really one of the kindest and hardest working septuagenarians I knew. He was in his 70s, still hitting double A's on the first, tune out the gate.
Yeah.
So he was still playing all the way to the very end and was a great band leader, a great guy. He was like your grandpa kind of, but he was Maynard.
Yeah. Were you in the band until the end, until he passed, or did you leave the band before that?
No. I had a pretty relatively short tenure at that time. He turned over a lot of tenor players. What happened is I was on the bus, and I got a call from my wife who had been snow skiing that weekend. She said, "Honey, I broke my arm."
Oh no.
And so, the road was tough. I didn't really like it, to be honest. I loved playing the music, but I didn't like stopping at Burger King twice a day and, riding the bus and like just being away from my wife, because I was married at the time. I discovered that like the road and bus life was not for me.
Yeah.
So that kind of presented an opportunity for me to hop off the road. And so we parted ways mutually. It was no bad feelings there. But, I learned a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah. Was Stockton Helbing playing drums in the group at that time? Or was that after?
No, it was Brian Wolf.
Okay.
Brian Wolf was.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was going to say, Burger King twice a day is undergraduate behavior, and you'd already gotten your master's. So,
well, I mean, it was the bus driver really. And that's a whole other story, is like the bus driver had played guitar with Johnny Cash, and Johnny fired him after he got straight. And so he was this sad sack guy who had this bus, and he drove for Maynard, but like, it was kind of a sad story.
Yeah.
The characters you meet on the road are pretty incredible.
Yeah. That's wild, man. And something that I think is, probably a question that a lot of people think is like the ability to have a genuine relationship, not a genuine relationship, because that implies that it's fake. The ability to truly relax as peers with somebody who, like you said, knew Johnny Hodges and Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker and Oscar Peterson, all these like titans, and then that person themselves being a titan. Did you ever lose the feeling of intimidation, like talking to him, just having those moments? Because like, even you can be familiar with someone and really love their company and it not feel this kind of like fanboy thing, but still be intimidated. But did like Maynard create an environment where you just felt like, no, we're just two friends hanging out, like this is it?
Oh yeah, he was always super cool. There was no airs about him at all, never.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't ride on the bus all the time with us. He would fly some dates. But when he was on the bus, he was just one of the guys. I mean, he had the big room in the back, of course, because he's the boss.
Sure.
He never got mad. I mean, there's one time I think he got mad that there was a hotel in Houston that made him come in to sign for it instead of his MD, right? And to sign for the bill. He got pissed off at that. It wasn't at us.
Yeah.
And the band was all killer players, so the music was so tight every night. There was no issue with the music at all.
Yeah.
And he had a good time. Like, the story goes is that he was a LA studio musician. He played all the famous, like Ben-Hur and stuff, trumpet. But when you're under contract with the studios out in LA, which he was, they paid him really well. It's basically like 1 or 2 hours every day and got paid. But he couldn't do any club dates. Like, he was under contract, so he couldn't play. He couldn't sit in. He couldn't do any records. Couldn't play any jazz dates. And so after a few years of that, he said, screw this, I'm getting the band back together. And so he quit. And he moved up, on the coast on California and had a nice pad. And then he got his Big Bop Nouveau together, and he just hit the road again until he died. So it's like he walked away from the bread. I mean, it's like, I'm sure he was doing fine with merch and stuff on the road, but probably not as nearly as good as he did in the studios. But I'm just guessing. But that's what he loved to do. So, I mean, it was like the joy just came out every day. You know, he was never in a bad mood. He was always great, always happy to be there with you. And so there was never kind of any intimidation. There was awe, you know, I was always,
I think that's
what he could do. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, he's still able to do this and having a great time. And so it was definitely like I said, it was a short-lived time in the band, but at the same time, it was a huge impact on me as not only a musician, but as a band leader. Yeah,
absolutely. Man, I am also so excited to hear about the story with Ellis Marsalis, because it's like, that's the jazz patriarch right there, you know? So how was that connection forged? And were you cutting that record at the same time you were doing your masters or just shortly after?
Yeah, same time. So that story. So Harold McMillan is a local bass player, but he's also a cultural historian and knows, you know, has deep roots in Austin, especially from East Austin, and knows the African American heritage and culture here like nobody else. He used to put on this jazz festival called the Clarksville Jazz Festival.
Okay.
It's held down in Peace Park every year. And it was a yearly thing that Harold did by himself. And he would bring artists in all the time. And this one particular year, I think it was 97, could be wrong. It was Ellis Marsalis. Well, at that time, when I was in college, like, you know, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, in that time frame, I was, you know, turned on to Winton and Branford, and had a lot of their records and listened to them. I thought they were awesome. I loved their music.
Yeah.
Black Coats from the Underground is one of my favorite Winton records, and Random Abstract and Crazy People music from Branford are two of my favorites, but I listened to all of them, you know? And so, yeah, I was on the Marsalis train. I loved all the stuff coming out of New Orleans and looked up to those guys and wanted to be kind of like them and play music like them. You know, it's kind of that new acoustic sound. You know, they were very opinionated about how it should be recorded, how it should be played. I bought into all of that. So I was very excited to hear Ellis come. Well, it turns out that a mutual friend of Harold's and mine, who I had played with in town, his name was Martin Banks. And Martin Banks, elder, who spent many years in New York playing the house band of the Apollo. He played with Dexter Gordon. He played with Duke Ellington. He played with Count Basie. In his heyday, he was very unique because he was a lead trumpet player, but he was also a great jazz player. Okay. And so everybody wanted him for their sections because he could do both. But at the time that I had met him, you know, he had some chop problems. He came back semi-retired from doing that, but he still played all the time. He was just the most amazing man. He's so genuine and had such great stories and always was cutting up and having fun and hot dog, Martin Banks. He always called me Big Fun. And so anyway, I knew Martin, but Martin had played with Ellis in Ray Charles's band. And they were buddies. And so Martin was playing with Ellis on his set that day. And Harold said, come on over here. And Martin said, come on over here. So I was backstage, had my horn, and Martin introduced me to Ellis and said, hey man, here's a young kid you need to know about, you know, Elias meet Ellis, Ellis meet Elias. So he said, come on up and play. And so I think it was Chris Searles on drums, Chris Marsh on bass, you know, two great local guys. And then I sat in with Martin and Ellis. And so played tunes, and Ellis, he was not a man of many words, right? What he said was short and succinct and to the point. And so he didn't say much, but I could tell he was checking me out. And afterwards he said, you sound good. And so the next night he was playing down at Cedar Street, which is a club that I had been playing at that time. And he played 2 sets, and he invited me to come down and play with him. I think I played Giant Steps, and I played something else. And afterwards he said, "Man, you sound really good. Thanks for coming down." He was very gracious for a man of his stature, of course. And so after that, I was kind of flying high. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." I thought I'd just chalk it up as one of those great experiences that, I would be able to retell. Well, I had a relationship with a guy named Tab Bartling who put out a couple of my records, including Kicks Are for Kids.
Okay.
And he asked me after that, I said, "Hey, well, let's get Ellis to play on your next recording." And that was, right before Kicks Are for Kids. And I said, "I don't know if he would do that. Why would Ellis be?" And so Tab arranged it. He called Ellis and said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So we got him over to Houston, which is where we did the session with Ellis. Interesting story about this session. So it was me, J.J. Johnson, and Edwin Livingston. We were just doing a quartet session, and I was planning on doing a bunch of my originals that I had written at the time, and I didn't send them ahead of time to Ellis. I just held him in such high regard and put him on a pedestal. I was like, "Oh, he'll be able to read all of my music down. It's not that." But I showed up and I put all this stuff in front of him, and it was like, it took him a minute. Like, I realized, oh shoot, I should have sent this music in advance, and we probably should have had a rehearsal. Because he was not cut, it wasn't like it was horrible, but it was like not, really the vibe that I was envisioning.
Right.
And what I did though was, which I, in retrospect, was pretty smart, was I changed the session. We immediately just started playing real easy tunes. We could all get on the same page with, because we only had him for like 3 or 4 hours. It wasn't like this 2-day thing. It was just like, okay, he's here for just a short amount of time. So I made the most of it. We got 2 tracks, an original of mine, and then we did "Just Squeeze Me" by Ellington. Made the record, and then we did cut a separate session with my band at the time, which was Fred Sanders, JJ, Edwin, and then I flew in my friend Tito Carrillo, who's a great trumpet player in Chicago now. And so that's what ended up being Kicks Are for Kids. And a chance to be able to hang and play with Ellis a couple more times after that. One was a jazz festival in Houston. And, it was an amazing experience that I got to be able to not only meet the guy, but play with him and record with him. Is definitely highlight of my career, one of the highlights of my career. And I was super sad when he passed away last year. I mean, I cried. I didn't know him like, I know Dr. Polk or some other more close colleagues, but the time that I spent with him was very impactful to me personally. And so I felt that loss tremendously. Like you said, he's the patriarch of the modern jazz scene, and his progeny have really influenced modern jazz in the 90s and 2000s. And so I felt very, very, very lucky to be able to do that with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody would criticize somebody feeling, genuine emotions about somebody who has been so, even if nobody knew him at all. I'm sure, like, swimming pools of tears were filled with just by people who just had the utmost, respect for him and his contributions and his family's contributions too, just as a whole to how jazz has evolved. Man, that all of this is so fascinating to me, man. It's so, I think sometimes when we grow up, we have this idea in our head that it's like, oh, it's just, this perfect thing where there's this inner circle, and then it, it all kind of reverberates in this like echo chamber, or not reverberates in an echo chamber, but like all the people are just with those own people. But hearing how it's literally just as simple as like, hey, here's this kid that you should meet, like Ellis, meet Elias, and how that can birth some really incredible, things. And then just moving up to Brooklyn, making the jump, doing these odd job gigs, and then having one come in that, yeah, maybe the Rocky bus and the Burger King didn't quite cut it, but like everything else was made up for in the experience. Right. Well, man, I also want to be respectful of your time. And I do really want to talk about Church on Monday. And, obviously that record, you put that record out under your own name before you started releasing things under that band name, and it got huge attention and notoriety and play all over the place. This might seem like an obvious question, but when you were recording that, did you feel any differently in the process of getting it together, the session, and then releasing it? Did you feel like, oh, this one's going to be it. This one's going to get like a lot of attention. Or did it just feel like, no, I'm just going to keep putting out records like the 3 or 4 that I've put out before this? And then it was like, whoa, this is kind of blowing up a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing about me that I hope other young musicians will take to heart is I never waited for somebody to sign me to a record deal, or I never waited for that big connection to have Bruce Lundvall from Blue Note call me and say, hey, man, or whoever it was, Coy Tyner, or, Art Blakey, or I knew early on in my playing career that there's nobody else that's going to do this for me. I have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And so going into the studio, paying for it, and then promoting it has been something that I've done since the very beginning. I was fortunate to have Tab for a couple of my records, for the Moment and Kicks Are for Kids. He did produce those.
Mm-hmm.
But that was in conjunction with me artistically. But all the other recordings that I've done have been me, and I've had a very disciplined vision about what I wanted to do and how I wanted it to go. Now, I haven't had tremendous commercial success. I don't think any jazz musician does. You're not doing it to make a ton of cash. You're doing it because you love to do it, period. And so with Church on Monday, the story goes, I was listening to Stanley Turrentine and his record called Hustlin'. And that record with Shirley Scott, who was his wife at the time, who was an organ player, Kenny Burrell. And there was something about that record that I was just taken by. I don't know why, but it just kind of struck me in my heart at the time, which was like 2011. And so at that time in Austin, Jake Langley was around, a great guitar player who had played with Joey DeFrancesco and had that great old sound like Kenny Burrell, and just incredible player, great sound. And then I had recently just at that year had played in Butch Miles's band, the Jazz Express. And so that band was kind of a real kind of bluesy. Yeah. And Paul was on the gig that I was on, and I played with him in many years. He's on my first CD called Standards back in 1994. And then we had just done kind of, one-off gigs over the years. And I looked at myself and I said, man, you've got to do more things with this guy. Like, he is a legendary figure. He's an amazing musician. I need to do more stuff. And so that gig was kind of the impetus for me to say, okay, I'm going to put something together. And it happened to be that, Jake with Dr. Polk were the two kind of linchpins. And I said, you know what? We've got the makings here of something that comes out of this sound, this Blue Note organ sound, right? Because the other piece of this is Polk was the pianist for Ray Charles, but he was also the organ player for Ray Charles.
Right.
And when I grew up here in Austin, he was only known as a piano player. I'd only heard about his organ playing with Ray. And so I was very curious to know, right? Part of my idea was that selfishly, I wanted people to hear Polk, the organist, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so it was by design that those two particular guys I had in mind for this session. And then I had been playing quite a bit with Daniel Durham and Scott Lanningham just down at the Elephant Room on a regular basis. And so those are the guys I called to fill out the rhythm section.
Yeah.
Now, to your question, did I think that this was going to be, would I be doing more records with these guys? Would I have a 8-year long residency at the gallery with them? No, I did not. I did not imagine. I just wanted to capture kind of what I was feeling musically at the time. And I felt like these guys were the ones to do it.
Yeah.
And so we went into the studio in the fall of 2011. And it took me a while to get it mixed and mastered. So it didn't really come out until the fall of 2012, almost a year later.
Yeah.
And I did the CD release party at the Elephant Room. Red Young let me use his organ. Thank you, Red.
Beautiful.
And I thought that was it. Okay, we released a record. We'll probably do a few gigs here and there. That'll be it. Well, I knew that the gallery was having jazz because Ephraim played up there on Tuesday nights. And most importantly, I knew they had an organ up there. They had a battery. And I was like, okay, this I think would be a good fit. This would be a good fit for me. And so I emailed Steve Wertheimer, who is the proprietor of the Continental Club, Sea Boys, and also the gallery. And I said, hey, how about a gig? You know? And so he was immediately got back to me and loved the idea of Polk in particular on the organ. And then just the concept of having this more bluesy, soulful jazz band up there. And he said, okay, let's try Mondays in October. This is 2012. How it goes. I had the CD out. I had already let the Chronicle know. I'd already let the Statesman know. And a good friend of mine now, I didn't really know him at the time. His name is Brad Buchholz, was a writer for the Statesman. And he fell in love with the record. And so did Raul Hernandez, who's the musical editor down at the Chronicle. So those two publications, as well as KUT, Jay Trachtenberg, kind of on board all at the same time. And I had this huge spread in the Statesman. I had a great review in the Chronicle, and they were playing the CD constantly on KUT. And so it kind of was this culmination of things that happened, not only from a musical standpoint, but also from the local press. I've been establishing relationships with those people for years and years and years, right? So for any musicians out there, it's like, oh, that was lucky. No, it wasn't lucky. It was only by design. And I had been cultivating those relationships with those people for many years. So I knew them, they knew me, and they were appreciative and understood kind of, oh, this is a unique situation with Polk on the organ. You've got Jake, you and the great band of Scott and Daniel. And so that residency of just a month is now, unfortunately it stopped during the pandemic. I'm hopeful that we'll be back soon.
Yeah.
Lasted almost 8 years every week, Monday night. It did turn into some other things, like we've got 2 other CDs. We got 3 CDs total. We were the backing band for Alejandro Escovedo for a couple of years. Our music's been played across the world, Japan on radio, across the world, Europe, Japan, United States, a couple of reviews in Downbeat. And so, yeah, it did quite well critically. But most importantly, musically, and the family that we've established as a band together. Tommy Howard is now in place of Jake, who moved out to Vegas back in 2014. And so now we've got this great crew of people that we know all over Austin, and it's just turned into this family affair, which I couldn't be more grateful for, because it's definitely been the highlight of my professional playing career to be able to make music with these guys for such a long time. Because, I know as a musician yourself, Christian, having a camaraderie with the same set of guys over a period of time, it evolves. It's not just you guys, great group of guys coming together. We're actually, and that band has evolved.
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. The person who has been my collaborator very closely for the past at least 4 years now, has been David Mescatique, which is why it was so special to see you guys playing with him. And
he's great. He's wonderful.
Oh man, he's so good. And there is something that is transcendent and incredibly special about really understanding each other as people, having that having that hang, of course, because that's going to affect how things are on the bandstand, but then also just like not only knowing each other as people, but knowing each other as musicians and knowing exactly like that wavelength. That is immeasurable. That is an immeasurable kind of quality to have with people. And that is something else that I loved this morning. Like felt very sentimental, and I was like kind of emotional about it. Just the way that you talked with the utmost reverence, where you were just singing the praises of Dr. Polk, and you were like, for a solid like 5 minutes, you turned over and you were just, and you know, he graciously just like sat there and wasn't like, oh no, but wasn't like, oh yeah, you know, like any of those kind of things. And it felt like, even though you've been playing with him for so many years now, it felt like the kind of going back to that Maynard thing. It felt like there was just a lot of awe, so much respect, and not to like assume, but almost like this kind of like the way that a kid looks up to their father, or like a mentor just in general. And it's just like, this is the guy. And I have the utmost respect for this guy. That's incredibly special. And so fun to hear about.
Well, you know, and I have no illusions. Like Church on Monday does not exist without Dr. Polk. You know, we may have other good players sit in that chair, but it's not Church on Monday without Dr. Polk, right? He is kind of like our spiritual guru, our guiding light is what I call him. You know, he's our North Star. And whatever cliche you want to use, he's it. Right. And you're right. You know, and that's part of my selfish reason for putting the band together is I wanted to sit by him every night. I wanted to learn from him. I wanted to hear those stories. I wanted to hear those licks. I wanted to be a part of that, because that's just making me better. Right. And it's making me a better jazz musician, also a better person. Like, he's the most amazing person you will ever like to meet. He lived an amazing life, and through some difficult times, thinking about being an American in the 50s and 60s and 70s in America is not easy, even to this day. And he just lives it with such grace and such humility, and he's accomplished is just so remarkable in his career. And he's so giving and sharing of his time and of his energy. Like, he didn't have to do this gig. It doesn't pay great. He just does it because he loves it, and he loves being around us. Like, he's definitely a mentor to me, a father figure to me, but he's also like a brother to me. Like, I love him dearly. And I am so grateful for that opportunity, but I'm also very happy that people get to know about him, because he's been here doing it for a long time in Austin. And every decade that goes by, people gravitate towards him, I mean, he's kind of been the heart and soul of the jazz community for years. And so every chance that I get to sing his praises, I'm going to take it, because he deserves every bit of it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So gracious and amazing. This has been such an amazing way to spend, an afternoon on a Friday, man, leading into the weekend. I do have a couple more questions, just very quick to ask before we jump off.
I appreciate the opportunity, Christian. Thank you.
Oh, of course, man. Well, I mean, really the pleasure is all mine to just be talking to musicians here in Austin, people that I know and have had relationships with for a long time, people like you who I ashamedly have not had the pleasure to know for too terribly long. I think this is like our only maybe second or third time talking. And then people up in New York, just like, I mean, this is, I wish I could say that Off the Bandstand was this, perfectly crafted thing where I was like, all right, and it's just going to be all about, when it comes down to it, it was kind of selfish where I was like, I love talking to these people. And this, like, I feel like I learned from it. And the same thing, right? Where you said selfishly, I wanted Dr. Polk in the band so I could hear him every night, hear those licks, digest that and learn. This is the same kind of deal. And I feel like it's a very healthy supplement to me hitting the shed, just being able to absorb from people who know a lot more than I do. So thank you, man.
I think that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah. So the last couple questions that I have, the last two we always end with is one, if there is a record that you would suggest that everyone go listen to like immediately after they finish this. We're releasing this tonight, so of course they need to go check out your stream at Native or show up there for maybe a chance at the sold out shows. But after the Native show, what is a record that you would say people need to check out?
Such a difficult question. Such a difficult question.
I know.
Because so many great records. So I guess what I will do is tell you about one that I've been listening to recently, and it's definitely in my top 5. Speak No Evil by Wayne Shorter.
Yep.
So, Wayne is one of my heroes. What I talked about earlier as far as being in service of the song, he is one that epitomizes this to me. And that record in particular, it's perfectly crafted. Every song is so amazing, but even deeper still, the solos within each of those songs kind of is a perfect representation of what I meant by carrying that line and insert to each of those songs. The melodies are amazing. The playing by the group is incredible. It's an all-star cast. Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Elvin Jones, instead of Tony, right? That's the real kicker for this record is Elvin instead of Tony, because it's Miles' rhythm section, right? Herbie and Ron, but with Elvin, Train's drummer as the drummer, right? And then Freddie Hubbard and Wayne on the front line, who, were in the Jazz Messengers together, or Blakey. So this is a very unique record, and the composing on it is just incredible. Like, it's still modern today, but it's rooted in the tradition. So that's one of my favorite all-time jazz records. I mean, I could go on and on and on about records that you should listen to, but that would be, say, check out if you haven't.
We'll do a follow-up of just Elias describes his favorite records, episode 41.5. So and then the last question that I have is, I think I asked you this on that elephant thing that we were doing, but the question I always end with is, we all have gigs from hell, where things just go totally up the wall, whether it was with Maynard or something like up in New York, whenever you were like hustling around there, or whether it was in Austin. What is a gig from hell that was exceptional, that you feel at liberty to share?
Oh man, yeah, quite a few interesting gigs from hell. Well, yeah, this one sticks out in my mind. We were down at the Elephant Room, and that's not a gig from hell, believe me, because I love playing down at the Elephant Room.
Yeah, sure.
But the pipes burst in the restaurant above.
Yeah.
And so the water started pouring out of the ceiling while we're playing, like bucket, not just a drip, 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 like flood of water directly onto the soundboard. So it's like blew up, smoke, the whole, like cartoon stuff, and we came to a screeching halt in the middle of the song, and like, poor Will, here he comes with the buckets trying to, that was the end of the night. Like,
yeah, right.
Or no more music, folks. Like, places flooding, band's gone down in flames.
Right.
Fortunately, they got it fixed and back up and running. Many great gigs down at the Elephant Room. I hope to be down there again soon, but that is definitely one of them. Another one, I'll take just a really quick short one.
Yeah, please.
I don't play weddings anymore because they always pay great and they can be fun. But I begged and begged and begged my friend not to ask me to play his wedding, but he insisted.
Okay.
And he said, you can do whatever you want. Don't worry about it. So we show up and we get the everything's set up, and I get a call from my bass player. He's stuck in traffic. He's not going to be able to get to the gig on time. I said, okay, well, when do you think it's going to be? And so 15 minutes goes by, 30 minutes goes by, 45 minutes goes by, an hour goes by, and pretty soon my friend, he's not happy. Like, where's the bass player? Why aren't you guys playing music? We need to have the father-daughter dance. I mean, I'm just sweating it. And, like an hour and a half to almost 2 hours later, here comes the bass player, right? And you've probably been in this situation before. And it's no fault of his. I mean, he got stuck in UT football traffic. I mean, maybe he could have planned around that. I don't know. But the pressure of having to, deliver the music when you're supposed to deliver it and you're not able to because of some unforeseen circumstance. I've had quite a few of those types of stories that are just really difficult to manage because it's your friend, right? It's like you want to do it for your friend, but that's why I'm like, guys, don't ask me to do weddings anymore. I just,
oh man, well, weddings,
it's too much stress.
Yeah, weddings are where all patience and understanding goes out the window, and not that it's like totally unwarranted. I mean, I get it. It's supposed to be this like picture perfect day, but it's like, oh yeah, like we had. I had one of those recently. It was with it was by no fault of their own, but just not to call them out. It was a horn player. So in that way, we could play the reception. Like the rhythm section was there. I was there. We were just missing that. And I luckily had my flugelhorn in my car, which I don't like to bring out on the gig too terribly much because I feel like scatting, I have more vocabulary than horn playing. I can play ahead, but improvising on the horn is not up to snuff with everybody else on the bandstand. But for the time being, I was like, well, they got a horn player. They bought a horn player. So until this person shows up, I need to be sweating on this. But yeah, I can't imagine like something as integral as a bass player needing to just be like,
yeah, the bass is the band. I mean, it's like without the bass, you're like, ugh.
Yeah. Man, well, yeah. Time stands still. Time stands still in those moments, and every minute is an hour. It feels like so.
It's true.
I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that, but hey, no more weddings, man. No more weddings. Well, Elias, man, I'm looking forward to the stream tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. And as soon as it's safe, man, let's go grab a beer. I would love to talk to you some more.
Hey, thanks, Christian. I really appreciate it for having me on. It was great talking to you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, man. Also, talk to you soon.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye-bye.